Good morning and welcome to this week's very, very sunny jump discussion. And today we hope to make the sunshine inside the office as we discuss closing more jobs in 2023. Before we get headlong into the topic, here are some facts from the recruitment market that I think we all should be aware of. These facts have come from one point, but if you go to the bottom of the URL when I give you it, it will give them loads of areas where they've taken all their stats from. So it's a really good area to get stats from. Okay, so the average time it takes to apply, or from applying for a job to landing a job in the UK now, takes 28 days. There are 9.8 million employed Britons who are actively seeking a job each day. 65% want a job that gives them a sense of purpose due to the pandemic. And the UK typically, or the UK employees, should I say, typically move job every 5 years, but they start thinking about moving that job 18 months before they actually start to move. One study says that the most common reason people are leaving is to increase salary and career progression. And the whole analytical of the HR team found that 59% of UK businesses now use recruitment agencies. Most job seekers use multiple online sites, which is pretty obvious, but on average, they have 5 sites that they visit to look for available jobs. And what they did was then one of the big companies did an eye tracking study of hiring managers who spend 80% of their time reviewing CVs, but what they purely look at looking at their eye tracking is they look at the name of the person, the current company and job title, the job description, and any previous job titles. And it takes on average 6 seconds for a recruiter to make the decision whether to put forward or not. On average, companies interview 4 or 5 people for each position, which suggests that job seekers may typically have to attend 5 interviews before receiving a job. So we all know that candidates out there are getting lots and lots of interviews. But here's the brutal truth. In 2021, the UK industry made 547,692 permanent placements in the UK. According to Reed, their jobs advertised in 2021 were 3.3 million permanent jobs. So if you work that out, that means just based on the Reed advertisement jobs and the UK job placements, we only filled 16% of the perm placements that have been advertised. That's a pretty poor number when we start to look at it in that way. We haven't got a 2022 breakdown, so we've got to start to think the normal stats, because obviously 2021 and also was the big pandemic year. So normally we feel around about 20% of the jobs that we take on, which means 80% of our time is working on requirements that make us zero profit. So we've got to start to think about the habits that we change. And that's what we're going to talk about this morning. We're going to talk about how we make more placements from the jobs that we have. Today I've got Paul, who's been to the dentist, so it's going to be an interesting conversation with Paul. And we've got Heather as well, and Dave's away somewhere. I don't know where he's traveling somewhere sunny, no doubt, from there. So let's kick off this morning. Okay, so Paul, we were down at LinkedIn, and one of the big questions that they said, what's the big thing that the recruitment market needs to change? And one of those things that they talked about was, the replacement ratios, or, are we improving our productivity, that what it looks like? And it hasn't changed for the last 20 years, 30 years. So why has recruitment placement ratios of filling 2 out of 10 jobs taken on never improved in the last 20 years?
It's a huge question. And by the way, as Howard said, excuse me if I'm lisping a bit because half my mouth is numb at the moment, which Howard's delighted about, but I'll do my best. The bottom line, I think, to answer your question, Howard, is that this relates to the fact that the industry hasn't really shifted that much from, and it's still the case, contingent recruitment. So we're still in that space with most recruitment companies taking vacancies from clients that have been given to many, many other recruitment businesses and are on job boards and are available on their website and so forth. So, the proverbial whiteboard on the wall is full of vacancies that, frankly, most recruitment businesses are probably not going to fill. This comes down to everything we've always talked about, which is that if you are going to improve your interview to placement ratios, your vacancy to placement ratios, You have to be super tight to your clients, and in particular, be looking to develop retained and exclusive models with your clients so that the vacancies you're taking are not only fully qualified, but that you have an outstanding chance of filling it because you're the sole supplier. When you're a multi-supplier, obviously the odds of filling roles are massively diminished. And this is particularly true, I believe, of working on PSLs of large corporations, where you get a huge volume of vacancies very often coming through, but the competition to fill those jobs is enormous, and it becomes a foot race to send as many CVs as you possibly can, and the old attitude of chucking mud against the wall, I'm afraid, becomes very apparent. That's the key reason why over all the years I've been in the industry, I still see these truly awful ratios occurring. We are not close enough to clients. We are not filling enough vacancies because we don't understand the roles, and we are competing against many, many other suppliers.
And just to back that up, I'll quote my old boss, who used to say, we as recruiters confuse the opportunity with the ability to execute on the opportunity. Yeah, and we absolutely do. We see those big clients with the hundreds of vacancies as such an exciting opportunity, and we have no ability to execute on that opportunity for lots of different reasons, Paul, and as you've expressed really clearly.
I think we look at it in that way, and I think we've not changed our habits, as Paul said. We've not changed what we've done over the last 20, 30 years. We're happy to accept low quality requirements, because what that actually does, it achieves a KPI target, which is a meaningless target if they're all low quality roles. We then hide behind poor quality jobs because we're hitting our target and we're trying to work those jobs. And I think what we do is we hold our client on a pedestal, and we're afraid to say no to a client and challenge the client. And in most cases, what we're not using data to actually focus on jobs that we can fill and start to look at the right things. So I think it's an accumulation of lots of different things is why that we're only filling 2 out of 10. And a lot of it is that we are not using the power that we have as a consultant to actually try educate our clients as to why we shouldn't be working these jobs and how they could change and get a better percentage fill rate themselves, let alone working for our own business and getting a better fill rate. So I think it's important that we've got to start to think, if we want to be better at recruitment, we have to change our processes and change the habits that we have. And that says we shouldn't be accepting every single job that we do at the moment.
Just to add to your point, Howard, I think it also comes down to a lack of training to give consultants, particularly newish consultants, the ability to challenge, and I use that word lightly because it's not about having a confrontation with the client, but challenge a client when we're given vacancies. And in a situation which we haven't said yet, but in a situation where, and you said it in your stats, there are not enough candidates, massive skill shortages, and in particular in certain industry sectors, we need to be a lot more affirmative about which particular roles we're going to work on and how we react to clients' requests, because very often our clients are being asked to fill roles that frankly they've got almost no chance of filling whatsoever. And then, as I've always said, we are unquestionably one of the most idiotic industries in the world because we work for nothing. I don't know, I'm sure everyone listening will echo this point. We don't know many industries that are no win, no fee. And that's exactly what we are. So, it's a level of vanity. We take on roles. As you say, it's often linked to KPIs and targets. Great, we filled up our walls with jobs we're not going to fill. And then we can't find the candidates anyway. We spend a huge amount of time desperately trying to find people that we can't find for jobs we don't understand, that are out there in the ether with 1,000,001 different recruitment businesses. And surprise, surprise, having worked really hard all month, we end up invoicing sweet Fanny Adams, as they say in my neck of the woods.
So let's push this conversation a little bit then, okay? So, just so people are aware, I've got a bit of lag on my system for some reason. I'm sort of freezing. I think it's the heat in my end from there. But next question then, Paul, okay, and Heather. What are the main reasons that recruiters then fail to set the client's expectations in order for the recruiter to execute a better service?
I think this comes down to, in part, what I've just said. I'm not sure we are giving our consultants the level of training and confidence to be able to push back when they're being asked to fill roles that are clearly going to be difficult to fill. And that may relate to the job spec itself, or the salaries and the benefits, or it may be that we're being asked to find a unicorn that no one else can find as well. We're not pushing back. We're not making decisions. You know, often people say, well, should I say no to clients? And I've always said, that's not the word I would use. I would sit down and I would have a very detailed, expert, adult conversation with my client to get them to understand that what they're trying to do is simply going to be almost impossible. And you know, if at the end of that conversation, the client is not prepared to be swayed by my discussion, by my argument, then I will do my best. I will be very polite and say, I'll keep an eye out, but my effort to fill that role will be virtually zero. I'm not going to get into any kind of confrontation with the client, but I am going to make a decision based on time and motion as to whether I should, or my team should, spend incredibly valuable time working a role that we think is almost impossible to fill. And I think the main reasons recruiters fail to set these expectations is down to a number of very important points. Number one, we are not visible. We still take vacancies via email. We copy paste, we stick them on LinkedIn, we stick them on job boards. Hardly any conversations about really strong qualification around the roles. We are not consistently in front, and I mean in front, face to face, or maybe through Teams or Zoom, in front of our clients to really spend time discussing the roles. I mean, I always say, if you put your house up on the market, would it be acceptable for the estate agent to say, let's have a conversation on the phone? Do me a favor, would you? You've got a mobile phone. Could you walk around your own house and take a few pictures and send them to me? And then I'll stick that in the window and see what we get. You would never accept that. Never in a million years. And why are we doing things differently? We should be going into our clients, insisting that we come in, or at worst, as I said, using this kind of medium to really get a strong understanding of what the role is, have a proper expert conversation about how we're going to take that job to market with the collaboration and involvement of our client and the commitment in terms of when they're going to interview and so forth. And then we do something, or we decide that actually they're asking us to do the impossible. And from a commercial perspective, quietly within our own four walls, we make a decision that we're not going to work the role. I think these are the specific reasons. And again, I'll come back to my first point. We're still taking contingent roles when actually we should be minimizing the clients we work with and working more closely with a smaller number of clients who are going to commit to giving us the opportunity to work with them on a sole agency basis. I
think confidence as well, Paul, is that you used that right at the beginning when you started. There's a lot of that. It's very difficult for new recruiters or inexperienced recruiters to have the confidence and the skills to have those conversations. And I do think those conversations are the right conversations that we should be having, but it's very difficult. And it, you know, the degree to which your recruiters have the confidence to be able to do that depends on how you're onboarding them, where they are in their training and development, how good your training is, and how experienced they are. So there will be a real mix in your organization of people who absolutely can do that and know it and have the confidence to do it, and those less experienced, maybe less successful, who are scrabbling around and haven't yet worked out where they should spend their time and effort and what's going to be the most productive use of their time, which is having difficult conversations with clients rather than scrabbling to fill 100 vacancies that they got really easily. And you know, that dynamic of where people are in their career trajectory changes the degree to which they've got the confidence to have that conversation.
I think you make a great point. Sorry, Hal, can I just tag on something that Heather's just said? And that is that we may get to this shortly. Howard made reference to our conversation with LinkedIn last week. And of course, ChatGPT was part of that conversation, artificial intelligence, AI and so forth. And here's the point that they were making, and we all agree with, that a lot of the sort of drudge, if you like, if we can call it that, of the jobs we do, i.e. lots of candidates searching, spending hours and hours in front of a computer screen trying to find people, reaching out to candidates and so forth, over the next 2, 3, 5 years will be completely taken over by artificial intelligence, no question about that. And what we will need to be doing when we look at who we recruit into our industry will be people with the ability to communicate at a very high level. In other words, we will be looking for people that, in the truest sense, are capable of being a consultants, in the truest sense of being consultative with clients.
I'll put a caveat that to Paul, because you're right, but the AI that will be coming will only be as good as the information that the candidate or the consultant puts in to actually do that.
That's also true, yeah.
So I think what we need to be thinking about, we tend to bend to the client's needs, and we should be setting firmer expectations from the job spec right at the start. So, we should be starting to state, the percentage chance of actually filling the job based on the requirement and based on the client's job process and our job process. We should be highlighting ways to increase their opportunities. And then when we set expectations, both parties should be fully aware and sign up for those expectations. Because we all work with clients where we go, yeah, here's 3 CVs, and then they come back to you 3 weeks later and go, those 3 people available? Well, 28 days they've gone, mate. No, they're not. And then we carry on working the job again because we're stupid. And I think we've got to start to think that if we set, well, we genuinely are, because we do that constantly. We've got to really be thinking about setting the expectations with clients and then working to those expectations, because that will help expedite the client's process, expedite your process, give the client a better opportunity of placing the person. But we tend not to do that because we tend to be worried. So we've got to start to think, remove the fear and have that conversation with the client and use data to fill that conversation. So there's a logical reason why the client will change what they're doing and do those things. And we've got to then set those milestones or those targets or those goals with our clients and ensure they're achievable from both sides. And I think that's a very different way of doing it. If they're achievable from both sides, then both parties start to win and start to gain. Where I think we take the client's viewpoint, I want someone really quickly, we drive really quickly, and then they spend hours and weeks and days and months, messing around during the recruitment process, which frustrates us, but we carry on working with the same clients. So I think we've got to start to think, we've got to set stronger and harder expectations with our clients. And that will lead to what data should we use to improve our fill ratio. So if you start to look at that, Paul, what data would you think you should be using to improve the fill ratio?
Let me start from going back to basics, because I mean, when you start using the word data, Howard, I think immediately you start talking about using, for example, we talked about ChatGPT and so forth. We'll come back to that in a second. Let me start with a basic, because sometimes we call it old school recruitment, and I always say it's a good reason we call it old school. It works. So let's start from the perspective of trying to grade the roles that we take at a very basic level. I mean, call it what you will, gold, silver, bronze, or worker percentage. What's our percentage chance of filling this role? And have a very clear understanding. What's your criteria for working through that process and figuring out, this is a bronze job, I have a less than 30% chance of filling it. Or this is a silver role, I have between a 31% and a 70% chance of filling it, and so forth. There should be a set criteria where teams sit down, work through the job details, look at the availability of candidates, compare salaries that they're being offered to competitors, and so on, and come up with a conclusion that may often be based upon our track record of working with that business in the past, our status with the client as well, whether we're working as a multi-agency or we're working in a sole position, and make a call on it. We often talk about Pareto's law. So we talk about that 80-20 principle. This is where this comes in. So which 2 or 3 jobs out of 10 should we 100% or 99.9 recurring fill? And let's work hardest on those roles, working backwards from that point. And as I said, at a basic level, If we did that on a daily basis, I would guarantee that we will fill more roles, because what tends to happen is that we spread our efforts across every role, which is, as you said earlier, completely idiotic, because some of those roles, no matter how committed we are not going to be filled, and every second wasted on those roles is a second that we cannot be generating revenue. So let's start with the basics. And you can go then and look at data. And data is quite easy to collect these days. We've got all sorts of methods of collecting them internally, of course, and externally. And externally, it's becoming easier and easier. Pump a few questions into ChatGPT, and you'll get answers very, very rapidly. When I go back to my business development days, and I look at things that we were tasked with by our clients, service level agreements, very often the data, sort of the data metrics were in there. So, speed of response, getting CVs over in a certain period of time, how many CVs to interviews to placements. I mean, a lot of that data is, I think, already in there. It's in your CRMs, and we can easily extract that stuff.
I was going to say, Paul, before we get into the AI conversation, let's not become over-reliant on ChatGPT, because AI is only good as the data you put into it. And I think that's the same as your CRM. It's only as good as the data you put into it. And so I'm exactly the same as you. When I was running, big businesses, I was looking at, you couldn't work a job unless you actually graded that job. But we were looking at, what salary data. We were looking at how many candidates are on our system that could be approached for that job.
Yes.
We were looking at the candidate market data. So how many other competitors are advertising for the same type of job? We were then reviewing the client's recruitment process, and what we were looking at was time to fill. And so we were looking at real-time data, putting jobs on in real time. So we could say, this client takes 3 months to fill a job. This client takes 6 weeks. This client takes 5 days. And we were looking at all of those data. We were looking at rejections. We were looking at counter offer data in those type of marketplaces all the time. And that gave us a real high view of, right, let's look at these type of jobs to work. And what that led to was we went from 2 out of 10 to filling 6 out of 10 jobs. And it was a real eye-opener to people. But what was an eye-opener from a manager's point of view, you could stand in front of a consultant and they'd say, right, these are the jobs that I've got in my pipeline that I'm going to fill, and I am going to fill 40 grand's worth of roles this month. And we'd say, right, okay, name the 40 roles that you're going to fill, name the 40 grands, and they'd name the roles. And you go, well, that role you took on 3 days ago, and the client takes on average 12 weeks to fill. So let's take that out. And we could then start to take out the ones that they weren't going to fill. And it left lots of consultants with, so I'm only going to fill 1 role. And sort of 9 times out of 10, we were almost right in exactly what they were going to fill. And once they started to understand that that is actually the way to run the business, what we started to get then was a massive upturn, was they were already rejecting the jobs that they didn't want to work, because they knew that we were going to say, you can't work them, because when you give me your forecast and you're not going to hit your forecast, there's a problem. And very well from a Deco point of view, when we were forecasting to Switzerland, we had to be 2% either side of our forecast, or we got our legs chopped off. And it was very much point then when you sort of went to the consultants, you couldn't have this bravado, I'm going to fill £100,000 worth of jobs this month. Well, let's have a look at the job pipeline. And so I think that all the data that you can get from your CRM, if you're putting data on live, and at that time we were taking our data from Excel spreadsheets because our system was pretty poor to do that. But we were taking all of that data and we were running that data. And once we had a certain, probably 6 months worth of data, we were absolutely almost spot on with what consultants were going to deliver. And it massively flipped their mindset with regards to productivity and how they could become more productive. And that helped massively from the HR point of view, that we had very few consultants then going into poor performance because they weren't hiding behind poorly qualified jobs. And we weren't working with candidates, working with consultants, and we weren't working with clients that were just, CV pits and just, recruitment process poor. We were working with clients that we'd actually make money from. So if we looked at that then, we know that the numbers are dropping at the moment. The vacancies are dropping according to the REC, and there's obviously a bit of conversation going on in the marketplace whether that's actually happening or not, because some clients are getting more jobs in than they had before. But let's take it, the REC are saying the number of vacancies are dropping. Okay, but there is a skills gap, and that is growing. We do know that is actually happening. There is skills gap is growing. So how do you educate clients in order to improve their capacity and capability to fill requirements? Because what we've got to understand that it's their capacity and their capability to fill requirements that generally stop us actually filling the requirement.
So there's a whole there's a very large view about this globally now, and they're calling it skills first recruitment. And I think there's a global realization that in certain areas of industry, the skills gap, in other words, the distance between the vacancies available and people with the relevant skills presently, is vast. And clients are looking for people in those spaces that simply don't exist, or if they do exist, they're working for their competitors and probably unlikely to leave. So this skills first attitude is really about, you can call it upskilling, retraining, using sort of standard language. It's the realization that if you simply cannot find relevant, qualified people, but you have to fill the roles, then you're going to have to upskill people. And this is where I think L&D also come in very, very much into the picture, because this is about taking people, I think, in the next 10 years from roles that are going to become redundant, antiquated, and giving them fresh skills to move into new opportunities that are going to become very relevant to the world and the society we live in. There comes a point, and it's only logic, where you realize that you are literally banging your head against a brick wall trying to find people who simply aren't out there. Or if they are out there, they're in such small numbers, it's increasingly more difficult to woo them to work for you. So what do you do under those circumstances? It makes sense, doesn't it, to bring people in who have basic skill sets and personality types that you're looking for, and then give them the new skills that they're going to need to be able to fill those roles. And I think with the big corporations, as they look at in the next 5 years, as there'll be redundancies in certain areas, I think you'll see that they will not necessarily let those people go, but they will convert a lot of those people to be able to get them to be able to stay in the business and do other roles in the company. Now, that's, I think, in part something we need to learn from when we talk to our clients, where they're looking for people that we find extremely difficult to find. Again, this is part of that earlier conversation we had about educating clients and starting to offer them candidates that aren't exactly what they want, because we can't find exactly what they want, but the people we're offering have the potential to do the roles in a period of time, maybe the next 6 months or so, or a year, with some good quality training. And I think that's something that, again, we need to teach our people to do. Just because somebody's not done the role before doesn't mean they can't do it with some support.
Yeah, I support that, absolutely. And from an HR perspective, the other thing I'd be measuring, the other piece of data, is from a much kind of bigger, more strategic view, is what about your retention of your own staff? If we are retaining people, generally successful people stay, then people are being successful in our organization, and we're getting our development of people right. They've got to come back to the same thing that Paul said before. They've got to have the confidence to be able to educate clients. You can't put a traditional contingent recruiter into a conversation with a client and instantly expect them to behave like a consultant.
Exactly.
Right? They don't know how to do it. They don't know how to have that conversation.
And we didn't recruit them to do that either, Heather.
Yeah, you've got to have your own skill transfers right? So you've got to be mentoring those consultants to be consultants, not recruiters.
But I think this goes back to a bit of old school recruitment and new school recruitment. And I think what you're talking about, Paul and Heather, is the same as what I'm going to sort of relay. I think this is all about trust. And at the moment, I don't think clients trust us enough, because we don't advise them enough, and we're not special enough or a specialist enough to be a consultant. And that's down to our training and what we do. So it means that our communication has to improve, both physical communication to our client, verbal communication and written communication. And the more we communicate with them, and the more we talk with them, and the more we invest in them, the more they will come and work with us. And so the client has to see what we're saying is absolutely beneficial to them. And they've got to think that the roles that we work, and we know if it's not mutually beneficial to us, and we've got to create that mutually beneficial track between both parties, so we both start to work. And that's the thing that most recruitment agencies haven't got. They haven't got that true buy-in from their client, where we see them as a prospect, as I keep saying, they see us as a suspect. So unless we can then start to create that trust, then we've got a problem. And I think trust comes from, having good rapport and constant rapport and consistent rapport with our client. It comes by proving that we are mutually beneficial to each other. And what ties that together, it goes back to logic. And if the logical reason of why they're working with you is strong enough, then they'll carry on working with you. And that means that you can start to challenge things such as their recruitment process. We can challenge things such as their salaries. We can challenge things such as their benefits, etc. So they understand the size. And if we want to change our fill rate from 16% to 40% to 60%, etc., then you've got to get the buy-in from your clients to do that. And so I think, as the skill gaps drop, to educate our clients and clients to actually understand what the market is like, because the clients still don't believe the market is as the market is, because no one's truly telling them. And what recruitment agencies are great at doing is self-cannibalizing each other. Our process is better than their process. We're better than them. We're better than them. Why are you working with them? Rather than actually giving them stats of the marketplace, which are undeniably true, and almost giving your client the brutal truth of this is what's actually happening out there. This is why you're not getting it. And how many times do I say to recruitment agencies, tell your client why it's a bad idea to have 4 recruitment agencies working on it. It doesn't create a competitive situation. It gives you the worst candidates quickest over the line, but it doesn't give you the best candidates quickest over the line. And they go, well, we should tell clients that. Isn't that our secret? No, it's not a secret. Tell clients it. Because if clients understand that that's what's actually happening, where they think it's a good idea because they've got a competitive marketplace, then no. So I think we have to have more honesty with our clients, and we have to improve our communication with our clients to actually move them forward. So why is our relationship with the client then so important? Because at the moment, I don't think we think we've got a good relationship, but we haven't got good relationships when you actually boil them down. And Paul, we see this every time we go and speak to clients. We see them when we start to list their clients and what relationships they have. Actually, it's a transactional relationship. It's not a deep and meaningful relationship. So why is it so important to have a stronger relationship nowadays?
Oh, gosh, it's not just nowadays, Howard. I mean, it's been forever. I get told by my clients very often, we were in with such and such a company, and Heather's made this point about this comment in the past. No, and I think so have you, Howard. You're not actually in with the company. You know one person in the company, and even on that premise, you don't know them that well. So and we have on our list, we have the name of the company. Wow, isn't it exciting? We work with so and so. No, we work with one human being in that company who's probably not using us exclusively either. So this point about relationships with clients is absolutely everything. I mean, when you look at really high billing consultants, when you look at the sort of stars that we revere in our industry, what you'll find consistently with all of them is they possess really deep relationships with a normally relatively small number of clients who trust them, and they trust the client implicitly. They work very tightly with each other. There's a huge amount of trust that's been engendered over a number of years. The client would never go to a competitor. You can forget about contracts. This is based on experience. They will work together for an indefinite period of time, just so long as the recruiter is consistently delivering. And of course, the recruiter consistently delivers because they understand implicitly and deeply what's required from them when they get vacancies from the client. And often those relationships develop into friendships. I can speak of that myself with my clients over the years, people that I know I'm now very close to as friends. People that I still see and continue to see socially. They all began once upon a time as me making a call saying, hello, wouldn't it be great if we got together and had an exploratory conversation to see if we could work together? And you move and you develop those relationships, and they become multifaceted and very enjoyable. And it's the very thing, I think, that makes working in our industry so enjoyable and so fulfilling, and so much better than sitting in front of a computer screen day in, day out, sending out useless emails and in-mails that get you absolutely nowhere, or indeed when you do find CVs, chucking CVs at clients that you do not know towards vacancies you don't understand, and missing the mark almost all the time. Back to your earlier 2 out of 10 ratio, Howard. This is everything, and it's the thing that's kept me compelled personally and thoroughly passionate about our industry for nearly 50 years. If you do not possess deep relationships with clients and you don't want to, please don't work in our industry. Go and do something else.
I'm going to challenge one bit on that, Paul, that as an email strategy to get you through the door is really good.
Yes.
As a building a relationship strategy, it's poor.
Exactly.
I'm not so we shouldn't be sort of having a suddenly go at let's throw emails out. As an email strategy has its right thing to get you through the door, but then growing that strategy.
Well, I would challenge you slightly on that point, Howard, because at the end of the day, yes, of course, you should send an email to introduce yourself. But how often do you see people so reluctant to pick up that old-fashioned thing we call a telephone?
I've said that often, that that is the best tool in the marketplace, and the only better tool than that is you in front of the client.
Yes.
And that's absolutely, I have no issue with that. But I think there's a point that say we shouldn't be sort of saying let's just sort of destroy that email. We should be using that, but also every time we speak to a client and we look at creating a relationship, we should cement that with that's what we've agreed, that's what we've talked about, and that email goes back and there's something in confirmation from there. But I think we have these very transactional surface relationships with our clients, and we need a lot deeper relationships. I'm afraid to go out and do that because we're afraid that, I've got to travel from Leeds to wherever it be. It's going to take us a day there to get there and back, but I could spend the day speaking to 25 clients on the phone. But that relationship will get you far better further down the line by going and seeing that. And that's one thing that I strove constantly, and I was shocked at how many clients said to me, I've never met a recruiter, I've never met my agency, I've never met the people I've worked with before, why do you want to come and see me? And once we got in front of them, boy, did you get far deeper information, far better information. You could change, you could coerce, you could do all sorts of different things because you had that face-to-face physical relationship.
And you got to meet wonderful people like our good friend and colleague Heather Solway, who of course was a prime target for people like me. I would dearly love to get a meeting with the lovely Heather and develop a relationship. Why not? I mean, it's they're not HR people and people hiring managers, they're not ogres. These are the same people that come to us when they're looking for jobs. And when we often talk about clients and candidates as some sort of separate entity, they're not. We just catch them at different points in their career cycles. It's as simple as that.
The question that's coming from Lauren: how do you build a relationship in the business sense? Well, it's got to start by building the business relationship and showing what you're good at doing and giving them information that helps them improve what they're doing. And if we can then create that mutual relationship, then from there will become a deeper personal relationship as you start to build with that person. And what we talked about, your top consultants, it's interesting when you go to see a top consultant and they're talking to people that they're working with, their first conversation is all about their family. It's all about what they're doing outside of work. It's not about work. It's all about everything other than work. And I remember having a conversation with one of my managers about a guy that I brought in, my old resourcer I brought in to the business. And she said, I know he's your friend now, but he just makes personal calls. He's just talking about football, cricket. He's just doing nothing but talk about, work. And 18 months later, when he sat there with a 20 grand a week order book, he's going, oh my God, he knows everyone personally. And he was all about that personal relationship. So that moves us to the next question. Why do we consistently overcommit to clients, and how do we change that?
I mean, it's a kind of revolving question because we shouldn't be overcommitting to clients who give us roles that we don't understand and for vanity stick on our walls, or we collect them to meet our KPIs. I mean, the bottom line is that this is back to the earlier point about making sure we have candid, open, expert conversations with clients to drill down to that 20-30% of the roles that we receive in order for us to be able to be successful. And I feel that this point about overcommitting to clients, and I hear it, yes, we'll go away, we'll work the role. It's complete idiocy. Why would we commit to filling roles we don't understand, or indeed we know we can't find candidates for? And this is all about the conversation we said earlier about having the bravery, the courage, the confidence to be able to push back and speak to clients in a professional fashion.
And doesn't this link back to the previous question, Howard, which is about relationships? So we overcommit to people if we don't have a relationship with them.
That's
if we
right.
have a relationship with them, we're going to honestly tell them when we can and can't help, or
Yes.
what they need to do differently in order for us to help them, because we have a relationship. If we don't have a relationship, we'll just say whatever we think is going to get us the opportunity to work the job, because maybe somewhere there's a 10% chance that will mean we hit our target this month.
And I think
that's so important for me. And to hark back to Lauren's question about building relationships, one of the things I used to do, engage, was talk to consultants about how do you talk to HR directors? Like, what's their job? Like, your job's recruitment all the time, 8-10 hours a day. Their job isn't. That's a tiny part of their job. So let me explain to you what their job is and what they do and what they focus on and what other things are on there, so you can talk to them in their language and on their terms and provide some added value to them. So it comes back to the relationship.
And just to pick up on that point, Heather, I think, if to come back to Lauren's question, I mean, there's a lot of answers to your question, Lauren, but let me give you a very broad question that I would always ask, which is to ask what challenges, what are the things keeping you awake at the moment? What are the problems that you have presently or you can see coming around the corner, and how can we help you to overcome those challenges? Let's talk about their issues, their challenges, the things that can make them anxious, and then when we retreat from those conversations and come back with proposals as to how we can provide a more holistic recruitment solution to whatever is keeping these people awake at night. And those are the conversations. It's definitely not about sitting in front of HR people, or indeed anyone using our services, and selling like a lunatic what we do. Don't do that. Ask questions about the client, understand what their issues and challenges are, then consider how you can address those problems. That's where the relationships start.
So to caveat all of that, we overcommit, and I think what you're saying there, Heather, is absolutely right, is that we are fearful of not supplying, and therefore we rush, we panic, we don't set milestones for the client and yourself to achieve. So we don't review the job spec, we don't review CV delivery, we don't look at the CV at all, we don't set interview dates, we don't set interview feedback time, we don't set offer management time, etc., all of these things that we should be setting. So we rush and we miss setting some really good milestones. And I think from that, we often get a massive smack in the face when the recruitment process fails. And I use SMAC as an acronym, that it is specific.
Acronym.
Yeah. That well, it's been a long day, Paul, still on your feet, and listening to you. But as you use it, I use it as a specific. It's methodical and consistent, and our recruitment process is anything but that. Our recruitment process is usually a massive rush, and what we never do at the end of a recruitment process is have a proper review of what's actually happened. And when we started to review our processes, I'd always ask 3 questions. What success did the process have? What failure did the process have? And what changes and new things do we need to add to the process to make it better? And they're the side of things that I start to look at. So I always think that our recruitment process, if it's specific, methodical, and consistent, we should always be starting to improve our capability and capacity to fill roles. If we then review every time we work with a client, work on a role, what worked, what didn't work, and what we need to change, we're always improving our recruitment process. That way, when we truly commit to a client, we should have no fear of delivery, because we know we should be able to deliver, and the client knows that too. And I think because we fear about I'm fearful to say we can't find that. I'm fearful to do that because I know the other agency will say we can. Well, let them say they can. If you know you can't find those type of people, then be honest about that. And I think that's the bit that we massively undersell ourselves on, our honesty about the marketplace. And yet I've got a client, and generally they are doing this, every time his consultants take a role, if he doesn't feel that the company can fill that role, he is calling the client and saying, look, my agents will always tell you that they can fill the role, but I'm ringing to tell you these are the reasons why we can't fill the role and why we're not going to work the role. And so he generally gives them reasons. And so he says then he tries to then convert that to either an exclusive or retained piece of business. And he says he's got in about a 5%, uplift from there. However, he's going back 3 or 4 weeks later and then speaking to the same clients, and they're 90% are saying, what you told me is absolutely true. I haven't got this. I've got poor of this. I've got this. I haven't got the quality candidates that you've done. And he's converting now 30 to 40% of those clients into retained work, purely because he's been extremely honest and he's saying no. Because remember, if you say yes to something, what are you saying no to? Because that's got to take off some other job that you're working on. If you're saying yes to this job, it's got to be better than the job that you're working. So I think we overcommit because we fear and we rush and we panic and we don't set milestones. And as I said, we get smacked in the face because our recruitment process isn't specific to the job, it isn't methodical, and it isn't consistent. So last question, very quick question. If you were a consultant, what would you be focusing on in order to be more productive daily, weekly, monthly, in order to fill more roles?
Okay.
Just a real quickie, because my answer will be the quickest, guaranteed, is the triage point, right? So my focus would be on triage. Only work jobs I've got a better than 50% chance of filling.
That's good advice. And my answer to that is be a consultant in the truest sense. Learn your profession. Have the confidence to be, as you said, Howard, open, professional, expert with your clients. And I think the second part to my answer is, and more so, really understand the tech, understand how you can use things like LinkedIn inside out, become a guru on it, get into whatever's coming in our direction from an AI perspective, because we need to find candidates, and filling roles is all about identifying people. And I said earlier too, having the confidence to be able to speak to clients about bringing people into their business who are not yet the finished product, but with some good quality support and training will be within 6 months to 12 months.
So I think I've got the same answer to everybody. I think no matter the size of the fee, only work on the roles that you can fill, and that'll be based on what the data is telling me, whether I've got the right candidate pool, what chance the client is on their recruitment process. And that word triage, constantly triage what's going on in the process, constantly looking back at what's worked and what hasn't worked, I think is the way to move forward, rather than just taking loads and loads and loads of roles on and having no chance and just swamping yourself. So only work the roles that you think you can definitely fill, irrespective of the fee. So I might have a role on that's, 100 grand salary and 20% fee. So I'm going to make a nice big fee. I might have then a 20k roll on and a 10% fee, but I can fill the 10% fee, and I'd fill that. I'd do that because that's the one I know I can fill. So I never chase the money. I chase the ones that I can genuinely fill. And if we went through all of our, requirements and looked at our list of requirements that we had on, and then said, 100%, 90, all the way down to 0% fill rate, I bet you get very few at the top that are 100. But what you generally find is they're the ones that aren't being worked because one client might be shouting louder than the other, etc., etc. So I think we've got to sort of look at that in a very different way and be very, processed in the jobs that we work, and that way you will generally increase your fill rate. So next week we have an interesting webinar next week. one thing we're getting asked an awful lot by clients is, or by recruitment agencies, is they're getting asked an awful lot about DE&R when it comes to tendering for big clients, when they're working with bigger clients, and it's now coming further and further down the line. So we're bringing a company on next week called Project X, who is a company that looks at creating a DE&I sort of process, but also a qualification for recruiters that they have a full understanding of DE&I. And I think it'd be a really interesting conversation. They presented this to people like the REC, who are very interested in this type of process and things like that. So if you're starting to work with bigger clients, doesn't matter the size of the client, it is going to become more and more the focus as the years move on. And therefore, this company has gone out, got lots of funding to build the business and working on the business, and they're starting to really motor now. And I think it will be a really interesting conversation about how you become better at DE&I, from a recruitment point of view.
Howard, it's Candidate X. If people want to check out their website, it's Candidate X.
Brilliant. So, Paul, Heather, thank you very much for your input this week.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the sun. Hopefully, if you're outside, cover up because it will burn, especially me with my northern blue skin. I go from blue to red, back to blue again, which is always a joy, from there. And I look forward to seeing you all next week.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Take care. Bye now.
Cheers. Bye.